Have you ever wondered why a man, confident in the light of day, becomes cautious, hesitant, almost fragile in the presence of a woman who carries silence like a crown? There is a power in stillness, a magnetic gravity that does not plead nor perform. It is the kind of silence that holds no judgment, no frantic desire to be seen, and yet watches with a knowing awareness. This is not mere quiet. It is a conscious, almost sacred energy that reverberates through the unconscious, compelling reflection in the one who dares to approach. Men, despite their bravado and layered egos, are drawn to this, and yet they instinctively withhold, obscure, or even distort aspects of themselves in its presence. They hide because silence exposes the unconscious in ways words cannot, illuminating every fracture, every projection, every shadow they have yet to confront. A woman who radiates silence occupies a liminal space, hovering between the conscious and unconscious, unafraid to witness the raw edges of existence. She does not flinch when a man's vulnerability peeks through the armor. She observes with the serene patience of one who has faced her own depths and emerged whole. Men sense this, whether consciously or buried deep within the psyche, and instinctively they retreat into guarded territories. They hide truths they do not yet comprehend themselves. What they conceal is not always malicious. Often it is fear, the fear of exposure, the fear of being rendered small by the gravity of her self-possession. In the presence of such a woman, even the strongest ego feels brittle.
The first secret is the subtle art of masking insecurities behind confidence. Men speak of ambition, of success, of clarity, but these are often mere veils over deeper anxieties. When a woman does not fill the space with chatter or reassurance, these masks cannot stick. She does not give permission for illusions to dominate. Her silence is a mirror, reflecting the unadorned self, and the man who gazes into it finds cracks he has long ignored. In this reflection, he may experience shame, longing, and the unfamiliar tremor of humility. This is why many retreat into performative behaviors, embellishing stories, achievements, or virtues. They hide the truth of their imperfections, fearing that such revelations might disturb the equilibrium of her composed gaze.
Yet there is more than fear at play. Men also conceal the restless nature of their desires, the pull between instinct and intention. Within every psyche exists a battlefield of projection and shadow. The woman who radiates silence does not offer the comfort of projection. She does not become a canvas for his unprocessed emotions or unresolved traumas. In her presence, the hidden impulses, the fleeting thoughts of power, of dominance, of avoidance, cannot take root. Men know this, even if only subconsciously, and they guard these impulses, often unaware of the weight they carry or the way their silence is received as truth. She senses it all, not through words, but through the vibration of being that cannot be feigned.
This silent awareness stirs something ancient, primal. The second secret men hide is their vulnerability to emotional intensity. They fear the exposure of a feeling so raw it could overwhelm them. A woman who is attuned to herself does not demand confession. She creates a space where authenticity is inevitable. In this, men experience a paradoxical pull. They are drawn to reveal, yet resist, trapped between the desire to be known and the terror of being truly understood. The more she embodies self-possession, the more he senses the fragility of his own emotional landscape. Many men will speak, gesture, or charm, but within the subtle architecture of their expressions lies hesitation, concealment, a careful curation of what is shown and what is buried.
Consider the energy of detachment in her presence. The third secret is the illusion of control. Men, particularly those conditioned to assert dominance in subtle or overt ways, instinctively hide the moments when they feel the lack of control most acutely.
They do not wish to expose the subtle panic that arises when their usual methods of influence are met with serene indifference. She is not dismissive, she simply does not react, and in this she becomes a force of clarity, an anchor of reality that their ego cannot bend. What emerges is a quiet game of concealment, not to manipulate her, but to shield themselves from the mirror she holds up, the mirror of integrity, of alignment, of unshakable self-awareness.
Silence carries a weight of discernment. The fourth secret lies in unspoken regrets and fractured histories. Men rarely share the fragmented narratives of pain, of failure, of the moments they wish they could erase. In her presence, these fragments feel more visible than ever, exposed to the purity of her awareness. They hide these parts, fearing judgment or misunderstanding, but also because such revelations require an intimacy they are not yet ready to embrace. The woman who radiates silence does not demand confession, yet her presence evokes it. Her stillness penetrates defenses, stirring the need for reconciliation with the self, even if the man is not ready to articulate it aloud. It is in these hidden corners, insecurities, desires, regrets, vulnerabilities, that true attraction is woven. She becomes a lodestone not through words, but through depth, patience, and unflinching presence. And he, caught between fear and fascination, reveals fragments only under the gentle pressure of her unconscious authority. The presence of a woman who radiates silence acts as a psychological crucible, revealing the layers men carefully construct around themselves. It is here that the fifth secret emerges, the hidden struggle with ego and projection. Men unconsciously project their ideals, their fears, and their unresolved inner conflicts onto women, testing reactions, seeking affirmation, or unconsciously seeking correction. But with her, projection falters. Her silence does not mirror his expectations. It does not compensate for the gaps in his self-concept. She allows him to exist, but not as a reflection of her desire or approval. He senses this void of manipulation and instinctively conceals the parts of himself that might provoke rejection, ridicule, or shame. What he hides are not lies alone, but the very fragments of his identity he fears even he cannot reconcile. This dynamic taps into the primal psychology of desire and self-worth. The sixth secret is the fear of inadequacy in the face of autonomy. Men often present themselves as decisive, capable, and fearless, yet the woman who embodies quiet authority forces them to confront the parts of themselves still tethered to dependency, approval, and validation. Her detachment is not cruelty, it is power. It forces introspection, revealing whether a man can stand beside a woman without needing to bend, manipulate, or dominate. He hides his insecurities not out of deceit, but from the recognition that she will not compensate, comfort, or diminish herself to soothe them. Her autonomy awakens a subtle panic, to be measured against someone who refuses to be measured, to be held accountable not by expectation, but by presence alone. The shadows he hides are not merely weaknesses. They are the echoes of a deeper, often unacknowledged history of relational trauma, emotional avoidance, and fear of abandonment. A man may speak of confidence and stability, yet within the unspoken corridors of his mind there is hesitation, doubt, and even regret. These hidden currents are amplified in her presence. She does not fill the silence with reassurance or flattery. Instead, she maintains a poised observation, as if silently noting each incongruence, each masked emotion, each hesitation in the heartbeat. He responds by covering these layers, not because he intends deceit, but because her unwavering presence acts as an exposure device, an unconscious spotlight on that which he would rather remain buried.
This tension manifests in attraction as a silent dance of surrender and resistance. Men are drawn, yet wary, compelled, yet cautious. They sense a duality. She is at once a mirror reflecting truth and a gatekeeper preserving mystery. The seventh secret, perhaps the most profound, is the simultaneous yearning and fear of emotional surrender. Men fear the vulnerability her presence demands, revealing one's true self, shadows and all, in the gaze of someone who does not need them to perform. They hide their true feelings, their deepest longings, and their fears of insufficiency, because such revelations require courage, self-knowledge, and acceptance of uncertainty. To speak openly in her presence is to risk exposure without safety net, and men instinctively withhold, crafting facades to navigate the magnetic pull of her enigmatic aura.
Yet, even as they hide, they are transformed by her silence. Every concealment is a reflection of the internal work she evokes, the call to confront ego, projection, and shadow. Her quietude is not emptiness, it is presence in its most potent form, demanding engagement with the self rather than distraction through external validation. Through her, men confront questions they often avoid. Who am I without performance? What do I seek beyond approval? Can I stand before someone complete and still feel whole? These questions linger, sometimes unspoken, shaping the contours of behavior, desire, and emotional complexity.
Her silence also teaches a subtle, unyielding lesson in patience and observation. She does not compel confession, but she creates a space where authenticity becomes inevitable. And in this inevitability, men learn to navigate the tension between their inner truths and the masks they present to the world. They learn the weight of restraint, the gravity of honesty, and the magnetic pull of genuine self-possession. To a man unready to confront his shadows, this can feel unsettling, even threatening. But to those who dare to lean into it, her silence becomes a mirror of potential transformation, a gateway into the deeper, often frightening territories of the psyche. In the presence of such a woman, the unseen currents of attraction are guided by forces beyond conscious control. It is no longer merely desire or ego at play. It is a meeting of unconscious archetypes, the animus and the soul, the shadow and the light. Every hidden truth, every unspoken fear, every fragmented desire interacts with her quiet force, shaping an intricate dance of emotional tension and psychological reflection. And he, despite himself, becomes more attuned, more aware, and more capable of discerning not only her power, but the hidden dimensions of his own being. The woman who radiates silence does not merely witness the surface of a man, she penetrates the undercurrents of his psyche. She touches the places he avoids even in his own self-reflection, steering awareness that is equal parts unsettling and illuminating. Men hide their susceptibility to her insight because it threatens the comfort of their self-concept. The ego, fragile and fiercely protective, recoils at the notion that it might be insufficient in the presence of a being unshakable in her own wholeness. Her silence is not passive. It is a quiet force that demands alignment with truth, forcing exposure of the unintegrated, unexamined shadows that they usually conceal from the world and even from themselves. Within this tension exists a dynamic of attraction steeped in the alchemy of psyche and spirit. Men fear her, yes, but they are also magnetically drawn. The very things they hide, the vulnerabilities, the impulses, the truths they dare not articulate, become the axis around which their longing revolves. There is an eroticism in recognition without demand, a desire that pulses through observation and reflection rather than through possession or overt assertion. A man may attempt to charm, to impress, to assert dominance, but every maneuver is met with a subtle counterweight, the calm, impenetrable presence of her self-possession. It is in this interaction between concealment and revelation that emotional gravity and psychological tension converge, forging a quiet, intense intimacy without uttered words.
Her silence also provokes the confrontation of ego defenses. When a man interacts with her, he is often unaware of the deep, archaic psychological scripts being activated. Childhood conditioning, relational traumas, and ingrained patterns of avoidance surface as fleeting thoughts, as unbidden impulses. He hides these because exposure could fracture the narrative he has built about himself. Yet in her presence, the narrative strains under the weight of reality. She does not fill the gaps with validation or reassurance. She merely exists, solid, perceptive, and unattached. This is terrifying and compelling all at once. He may not understand why he feels both drawn and wary, but this tension is precisely the hallmark of her power, the silent orchestration of self-reflection and growth in those who dare approach.
The subtleties she evokes awaken the unintegrated shadow within him, compelling recognition of the aspects of himself he has long denied: anger, inadequacy, envy, desire for control, longing for approval. All of these hidden facets stir in response to her presence. He conceals them, consciously or unconsciously, yet their activity is undeniable. She does not chase, she does not demand, she merely holds space, and the void she creates cannot be filled by performance or pretense. Men experience this as both an attraction and a test, a subconscious assessment of whether they can meet depth with depth, presence with presence, authenticity with authenticity. In every glance, every pause, every measured word, her silence acts as a mirror reflecting the hidden architecture of his inner life.
This is where desire becomes complex, multi-layered, and psychologically charged. A man may attempt to decode her stillness, to navigate the terrain of her quiet power, but often he finds himself disoriented. Her silence is a language unto itself, an unspoken lexicon of self-knowledge, detachment, and integrity. She conveys boundaries without assertion, strength without force, and presence without obligation. In response, he conceals what he believes might betray inadequacy, vulnerability, or lack of self-mastery. Yet these very concealments, paradoxically, reveal the magnetic pull of her archetypal power. Every hidden truth becomes a reflection of the psychological alchemy she invokes, the tension between ego projection and authentic self, between desire and restraint, between fear and fascination.
The more she maintains her silence, the more the man senses the gravity of her self-possession. He hides aspects of himself not because of deceit, but because she compels a confrontation with what lies beneath, the raw, often unarticulated impulses, desires, and insecurities that he rarely admits, even to himself. There's a magnetic danger in this, a poetic tension that borders on the sacred. Her stillness is not emptiness, it is concentrated force, a reflective power that stirs growth through observation and introspection. It forces men to reckon with the aspects of their being they have long evaded, illuminating truths that are at once alluring, frightening, and transformative. Even when a man is unaware of the psychological currents she awakens, the effect is undeniable. He may feel drawn, unsettled, fascinated, or even frustrated, and all the while she remains anchored in herself. This is the paradoxical power of her silence. It provokes revelation without demand, intimacy without imposition, and transformation without coercion. In essence, she is both mirror and magnet, reflecting the unacknowledged truths of his inner world, while simultaneously drawing him into a gravitational field of awareness, presence, and depth that cannot be ignored or manipulated.
Some men hide their capacity for regret,
the quiet ache of missed opportunities and unspoken apologies that linger beneath their surface composure. In her presence, these unprocessed emotions pulse with greater intensity, demanding recognition even if he does not dare speak them aloud. She does not prod for confession, but her stillness compels self-examination. He feels the weight of every evasion, every rationalization, every defensive narrative he has constructed to justify his choices. To be with her is to confront a mirror of inner truth, and men instinctively hide those facets that might fracture the illusion of control they cling to. Yet this concealment, paradoxically, draws them closer to the emotional gravity she emits, for they are aware, however subconsciously, that her presence resonates with the parts of themselves they have neglected, suppressed, or denied. Men also conceal the depth of their fascination with her autonomy. The magnetic pull she exerts is unlike ordinary attraction. It is an archetypal resonance, stirring ancient patterns of pursuit, reverence, and fear. She is not simply a woman to be won, admired, or possessed. She is an embodiment of inner authority and self-possession that challenges the very foundations of ego-based desire. In response, men often mask their awe with bravado, humor, or distraction, afraid that acknowledgement of this fascination might expose vulnerability. They hide the fact that they are drawn not just to beauty or charm, but to the silent power she carries, the presence that is unyielding yet inviting, detached yet magnetic. Every hesitation, every subtle concealment is a reflection of the tension between ego and instinct, between the desire to approach and the fear of being unworthy.
There is also the secret of emotional inconsistency. Many men unconsciously oscillate between engagement and withdrawal, curiosity and retreat, driven by the paradox of her silence. She does not react predictably, and this unpredictability challenges habitual patterns of control and manipulation. He hides the internal struggle between wanting to impress and needing to retreat, between craving intimacy and fearing exposure. This oscillation is not deception in the conventional sense. It is a reflection of the psychological work her presence activates. In a woman who radiates silence, every gesture, every glance, every pause becomes amplified in significance. Men sense that authenticity is required, yet instinctively they protect themselves, conceal their contradictions, and craft a persona that can navigate the tension without shattering the fragile equilibrium of their self-concept. Her silence also exposes the subtle interplay of desire and morality that many men hide from themselves. She awakens the awareness of impulses, fantasies, and ethical compromises that they rarely confront. The presence of such a woman acts as a light that illuminates the shadowed corridors of the psyche, revealing not only what they crave, but also what they fear in themselves. Men conceal this duality because acknowledgement demands courage and introspection. To admit the complexity of desire in the face of unwavering authenticity is a confrontation with self that many are ill-prepared to endure. And yet, the very act of concealment signifies the magnetism she wields. The deeper the hiding, the stronger the unspoken pull toward honesty and self-exploration. Another layer is the hidden fragility beneath cultivated strength. She stirs recognition of moments when his competence falters, when the veneer of control slips, and when insecurities emerge unbidden. Men often hide these instances, polishing the outer image while the inner truth trembles. Her silence magnifies the contrast between performed strength and authentic being. It exposes the subtle cracks and ego defenses that have long been ignored. She does not exploit these weaknesses. She does not push for disclosure. Yet her presence renders pretense impotent, illuminating vulnerability simply by existing as a stable, whole, and aware presence. The revelation does not require words. It is transmitted through energy, through measured stillness, and through an absence of expectation.
Finally, she uncovers the secret yearning for emotional reciprocity that many men hide even from themselves. Deep down, he craves connection that is profound, unfiltered, and authentic, a bond that transcends superficial attraction. Yet he conceals this yearning, often out of fear of judgment, fear of inadequacy, or fear that exposure might unbalance the delicate dance of attraction and power. Her silence compels him to confront this yearning, to recognize the truth of his desires, and to measure them against the standard of a woman who is complete unto herself. It is a test of integrity, courage, and the willingness to face inner realities without projection, manipulation, or avoidance. In the end, her silence is both revelation and crucible. She is not defined by words, nor by external validation, nor by the transient attention of those who approach her. She is a presence that catalyzes introspection, self-awareness, and confrontation with the hidden corners of the psyche. Men hide their fears, their vulnerabilities, their regrets, their desires, and their contradictions, yet in doing so, they are inevitably transformed by the gravity of her being. Her quiet power is not passive. It is an active force of reflection, attraction, and awakening, compelling those who encounter it to reckon with truths they often cannot admit, and awakening a desire for authenticity that cannot be silenced.
The transformative force of her silence extends beyond mere interaction. It reshapes the psychological landscape of those who dare to enter it. A man may attempt to control the narrative, to assert dominance through words or gestures, yet she refuses to participate in this theater. Her stillness is a field of gravity that draws the hidden contents of the psyche to the surface. He hides the nuances of his ambition, the fears tied to failure, the quiet longing for validation, and the suppressed impulses he has long denied. And yet, as he conceals, he also feels the subtle pressure of her presence urging him toward coherence, toward alignment between who he pretends to be and who he truly is. In this way, she becomes an unconscious catalyst for individuation, a force that calls forth integration of shadow, ego, and desire.
In the quiet spaces between words, she commands presence. Men may attempt to impress, to charm, to assert cleverness, but all such efforts pale in comparison to the weight of her unshakable self-possession. This is where the tension between projection and authenticity becomes most pronounced. She does not indulge the illusions of grandeur or the defensive narratives that many men unconsciously craft. Her silence acts as an unwavering witness, reflecting not only what is visible, but also what is hidden beneath layers of ego and social conditioning. In her presence, a man confronts the paradox of desire. He is simultaneously drawn to her and afraid of the exposure her presence demands. The stronger her poise, the more acutely he experiences the fragility of his own defenses, and the more he hides, not from malice, but from the psychological compulsion to protect the parts of himself he has yet to reconcile.
Her power is subtle, yet profound. The seventh secret she evokes is the hidden longing for transformation. Men do not readily acknowledge that beneath bravado, beneath the curated persona, exists a deep desire to confront their own shadows. She awakens this desire simply by being, a quiet, steady, radiant force. He may resist, divert, or distract himself from these inner stirrings, but her presence acts as a mirror to his latent potential, illuminating what could be, what might be reconciled, and what he has denied for too long. She embodies the archetype of the silent guide, a force that does not demand, yet facilitates profound awakening.
He hides this longing because its acknowledgement requires humility, courage, and a willingness to encounter truths that have long been buried beneath the weight of pride, fear, and habit.
Yet within this concealment lies the paradox of attraction. Men are magnetically drawn to the very qualities they fear or cannot fully grasp. Her autonomy, her composure, her refusal to react to projection or manipulation creates a gravitational pull that is both terrifying and intoxicating. Every secret withheld, every impulse restrained, every hesitation in voice or gesture is a testament to the tension she invokes, an unspoken dialogue between ego and authenticity, desire and restraint, fear and fascination. This is not manipulation. It is the natural consequence of a presence that reflects truth without words, that demands integrity without imposition, that awakens the unconscious without force. Her silence cultivates an arena where men are tested, not through confrontation, not through challenge, but through reflection. In her presence, the masks fall away of their own accord, revealing vulnerability, aspiration, and the concealed contours of their emotional and psychological lives. They hide aspects of themselves because confrontation is uncomfortable, exposure is risky, and the gravity of her awareness is formidable. Yet in hiding, they are drawn closer to the unspoken truth that her value lies not in external approval, not in flattery, not in compliance, but in the radiance of self-possession, the quiet mastery of being, and the unassailable authority of inner peace. Every interaction with such a woman becomes an unconscious negotiation between projection and insight. Men may attempt to steer, to charm, or to dominate, but ultimately the silent power she exerts is irresistible precisely because it cannot be possessed. It commands reflection, demands integrity, and provokes growth. In their concealments, men inadvertently engage with the most profound truths of themselves. The unacknowledged shadows, the latent desires, the quiet fears, and the unspoken longings that have been carefully sequestered within the psyche. Her silence does not coerce, it simply illuminates. It is a gravitational field that draws authenticity to the surface, compelling confrontation with the aspects of self that are most often hidden, most often denied, and most often feared.
This presence is not fleeting, nor is it superficial. It transcends time, circumstance, and social convention. It exists as a constant axis of psychological gravity, a force that calls forth the hidden depths within men, while remaining untouched by their attempts at control or manipulation. In her, the unspoken secrets find resonance, and the shadows of the psyche are compelled to surface, not in shame or coercion, but in recognition of the transformative power she embodies. She is not a puzzle to be solved, nor a prize to be won. She is an archetype of self-realization, of quiet authority, and of unshakable presence that invites men to confront the entirety of their being.
There is a liberation in her presence that men cannot fully articulate, a recognition that their concealments, the insecurities, the unprocessed grief, the unacknowledged desires, are no longer protected by the distractions of performative charm or social expectation. In the orbit of her silence, every hidden fragment of self is drawn toward examination. She does not demand confession, nor does she seek to fill the spaces between words with reassurance. Instead, she exists as a lodestar of integrity, a stable point in the swirling chaos of ego and projection. The man who encounters her finds himself navigating a landscape both terrifying and intoxicating, compelled to confront the facets of his psyche he has long avoided: fear, longing, inadequacy, and the shadows of past relational wounds. He hides these because exposure feels perilous, yet their very concealment fuels the intensity of the connection, the gravitational tension that both repels and attracts, fascinates and intimidates. She teaches without teaching. Her silence is a pedagogy of self-possession. Men learn that their worth cannot be asserted through words alone, nor their desires secured by charm or manipulation. To be present with her is to be called into alignment with one's own authenticity. Her gaze, quiet yet penetrating, evokes a subtle reckoning. How much of one's life is constructed for appearance, and how much is anchored in genuine selfhood? He hides his imperfections, yet he cannot escape them. She does not need to point them out. Her presence amplifies their awareness. In every hesitation, every slight deflection, every careful articulation, he negotiates the tension between the self he presents and the self he has yet to reconcile.
There is a sacred rhythm to this dance. Men conceal not only fear and desire, but also an unspoken reverence. The very act of hiding signals recognition of her power. He senses that she is whole, unshakable, untethered from external validation, and this recognition is both alluring and unsettling. The attraction she evokes is not superficial, it is archetypal, reaching deep into the unconscious, stirring impulses that have no name, yet demand acknowledgement. Every pause she holds, every moment she refrains from filling silence, becomes a dialogue with the unspoken layers of his psyche. He hides to protect, to manage, to navigate the unfamiliar territory of her self-possession, yet in doing so he is drawn ever closer to the transformative gravity she exerts.
The effect of her presence is profound and cumulative. It is not merely the allure of mystery, it is the revelation of truth. She reflects the ego's limitations, exposes unintegrated shadows, and awakens latent desire for authenticity. Men conceal because facing these truths is uncomfortable, yet the concealment itself is evidence of the power she wields. She teaches through contrast, the difference between projected self and authentic self, between performance and being, between the shadows of fear and the clarity of self-awareness. He senses that to be fully present with her, to risk exposure and embrace vulnerability, is to encounter the potential for personal transformation, a transformation that is both frightening and irresistible.
Her silence fosters a paradoxical intimacy. There is no overt emotional demand, no expectation of performance, no external metric of worthiness, and yet the psychic proximity she creates is unparalleled. Men hide because they cannot control the gravitational pull she exerts, because the reflection of their concealed truths is unavoidable, and because the tension between attraction and fear, desire and exposure, becomes almost unbearable. She is a lodestar, calling forth the unconscious dynamics of shadow, projection, ego, and desire with effortless potency. In every interaction, she evokes the latent potential for individuation, the integration of all aspects of self into a coherent, authentic whole.
Ultimately, her presence is an invitation to liberation. Men hide their secrets, yet they are simultaneously awakened by her stillness, drawn into a space where ego defenses dissolve, authenticity emerges, and transformation becomes inevitable. The intensity she provokes is not mere romantic attraction. It is a confrontation with selfhood, a call to face fears, desires, and shadows that have long been hidden from conscious view. She does not demand change. She embodies a force so complete, so serene, and so magnetically autonomous that the reflection of the hidden self becomes unavoidable. Her silence is a crucible, and within it, every hidden impulse, every concealed truth, every unspoken longing is given the opportunity to surface, to be reconciled, and ultimately to be liberated.
And in the culmination of this silent power, the woman who radiates stillness reaches beyond the dynamics of concealment and revelation, guiding both herself and those around her toward emotional emancipation. She does not need to speak to assert her authority. Her very being communicates the full spectrum of self-possession. Men may approach her with hidden motives, unspoken fears, and carefully curated facades, yet in her orbit these masks begin to crumble. The concealments they cling to, the insecurities, the unprocessed shadows, the longings they have not dared to articulate, are gradually drawn into the light of conscious recognition, not by coercion, but by the undeniable gravity of her presence. Her influence is paradoxically subtle and profound. She does not push, she does not demand, and she does not manipulate. Yet the reflection she offers, the unwavering awareness of self, the refusal to fill silence with validation, the serene observance of truth, acts as an irresistible force, compelling the ego to reckon with what it has hidden. This is where true attraction intersects with psychological awakening. Men may attempt to control, to charm, or to impress, yet these strategies fall away under the weight of her quiet mastery. She does not require them to be perfect. She merely requires that they confront the whole of themselves, that they navigate the tension between fear and desire, concealment and exposure, illusion and authenticity. Her presence cultivates detachment not through rejection, but through self-alignment. The final transformation she evokes is the liberation from a need for external validation, both for herself and for those who enter her orbit. Men realize, consciously or unconsciously, that she cannot be possessed, swayed, or diminished by projection. She exists independently of approval, admiration, or emotional manipulation. Her silence is not absence, it is sovereignty. In response, men are forced to confront their own attachments to outcomes, their dependency on external affirmation, and the vulnerability that arises when masks no longer suffice. This confrontation is uncomfortable, often anxiety-inducing, yet it is the crucible in which personal growth is forged.
The power of her silence is also a reclamation of inner freedom. She embodies the principle that presence is more potent than persuasion, that being is more transformative than doing, that integrity surpasses performance. Men hide, they hesitate, they resist, yet in doing so, they engage in a dynamic that is profoundly educational, emotionally charged, and psychologically catalytic. Every concealment is an encounter with their own shadow. Every hesitation is an opportunity to measure courage. Every unspoken fear is a doorway to greater self-awareness. Through her, they glimpse the possibility of wholeness, not imposed, not dictated, but reflected and evoked by the gravity of her inner equilibrium.
Her final lesson is one of detachment and rebirth. She demonstrates that power does not lie in domination or persuasion, but in alignment with self. The woman who radiates silence is untethered from external contingencies. She is not defined by admiration, not measured by acceptance, and not constrained by need. Men, witnessing this, confront the essential truth that authenticity cannot be coerced, and that the deepest forms of connection arise not from compliance or performance, but from the voluntary engagement of shadow, ego, and desire, with a presence that demands nothing yet reveals everything. They hide, yet they are drawn inexorably toward reflection, transformation, and the deep gravitational pulse of truth she embodies. In the end, her silence does more than attract, it liberates. It illuminates, refracts, and transforms the hidden parts of those who encounter it. It does not plead, it does not chase, it does not depend. It merely exists as a living testament to the power of self-possession, the inevitability of reflection, and the quiet authority that arises from knowing one's worth. The men who have concealed, feared and longed find themselves challenged to reconcile with their shadows, to confront their unspoken truths, and to awaken to the potential of authentic connection and self-realization. And as they do, they come to understand a profound paradox, that the woman who radiates silence does not bind, does not demand, and does not chase. She simply exists, fully, utterly, and without compromise.
The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.